This is Engage New York, Module 3, Lesson 13. Read the objective while I read it out loud. I can use fraction benchmark numbers to assess reasonableness of addition and subtraction equations. So what we're going to use is basically like quarters, halves, 3/4, knowing where a number sits on a number line. If it sits closer to 0 or sits closer to a whole number. And then when you try to add them up, or do you think it's going to be more than 1 or greater or less than 1 kind of thing? So that's where it's using fraction benchmark numbers. Like this would be considered a fraction benchmark number. Because you also know that's 25%, you know that's 50%, you know that's 75%. So those would be called a fraction benchmark. Okay, our fluency practice from fractions to decimals. I'm going to say the fraction and you tell me the unit form. So when I say 1/10, what does 1/10 look like in unit form? So 1/10 would be 0.1, right? What about 1/3? What is the unit form? That's right, it'd be 0.3, right? And then, or 0.33. And 0.7, what do you think the unit form would be for that? 7/10, right? So 7/10. And then now I'm going to go back and write it like this. 1/10, 3/10, and 7/10. All right, now say it in decimal form. Oh, okay, so this is the unit form, 1/10, 3/10, 7/10. Now the decimal form, if you multiply by 5 and create this in it to a 10, we'd say this is 5/10 or 0.5, right? All right, now the equivalent fraction. So the equivalent fraction, say the equivalent fraction with the missing number. Let's see. 1/2 is equal to 5/10, right? And so, but now we're going to move on to say it in decimal form. All right. So 3.5 would be 3.5, right? Because it's 5/10. Now, my trick for you is whenever you're being asked to do something like that, is always convert your fraction into tenths, hundreds, or thousands. And you do that by multiplying. So 5 times 2 gives you 10. And then whatever you do to the bottom, you do to the top. So that would be 2/10. Multiply by 2, multiply by 2. That would be 4/10. Multiply by 2, multiply by 2. That's 0.8. And then if you did it here, you'd be 2.8, 2 8/10. Now, a quarter, what does that look like as a decimal? Well, you should know that it's 0.25 because a quarter of a dollar is 25 cents. Then 3/4 is 0.75. So 5 3/4 is really 5 decimal point, 0.75. All right, let's keep going. So 1/25, what do you think we should write for 1/25? Well, you can multiply this by 4 and multiply that by 4, and it's going to give you 100. So now you're going to have 4 hundredths. Do the same thing, multiply by 4, multiply by 4. Now you have 8 hundredths. Multiply by 4, multiply by 4. So I'm trying to create, in order to put it into decimal form, I'm going to need tenths, hundreds, or thousands. So if I multiply by 4, I'm going to take it to the hundredths, and that's going to be 12 hundredths. And then 5 3/25 that would be 5.12. Now the same idea is with 20ths, multiply by 5, multiply by 5, you have 5/10ths, right? No, 5/100ths. Multiply by 5, multiply by 5, you have 5/500ths. Then 3 multiplied by 5, multiply by 5, you 3 and you know the decimal point is the word and, 5/500ths. All right, so take that in for a moment. Notice how I'm trying to create tenths and hundredths in order to convert that fraction. I mean, convert the fraction into a decimal. All right. Next part of our fluency is adding and subtracting fractions with unlike units. So true or false? 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/2 is 2/6. So it looks like we just added straight across. Is that going to be true or false? So I want you to do these 5 problems, write down true or false independently without solving. Just look at it and try to decide if it's correct or incorrect. Then your application problem, Mark jogged 3 5/7 kilometers. His sister jogged 2 4/5 kilometers. How much farther did Mark jog than his sister? So I want you to go ahead, work on these 5 problems using either true or false, and then come down, solve the application problem, and then come back to check your work. All right, so how did you do on your estimations? What particular strategy did you use? I know in my head, I knew that this has to become 2. Has to become 4 in order to add, so I'd have to add 2 up here. So I knew that was wrong. Same over here, I knew I'd have to multiply this by 4, and 4 plus 3 is 7. That's how I did that. Then the application problem, 3 5/7, subtract 2 4/5. I had to create a common denominator, realize that the bottom fraction, the numerator is greater than the numerator in the top fraction. I had to come over here and borrow, turn that into 35 over 35, which is 60 over 35. Now I can subtract. Mark jogged 32/35 kilometer more than his sister. All right, that is it for fluency for today. We come on back for concept development of lesson 13.